welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful and, most controversial tools we have in the fight against climate change, carbon markets. They're a huge deal, already reshaping our economy. But how do they actually work? And maybe more importantly, can we even trust them? Let's get into it.
It all really boils down to this one question. It sounds so simple, right? How do you put a price on pollution? But wow, is it complicated. And that single challenge, that's the reason this whole world of carbon markets even exists. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to tackle the basic idea. What even is a market for emissions? Then we'll see that it's not one thing, but really two separate worlds, compliance and voluntary markets. After that, we'll get into why a ton of carbon isn't always just a ton of carbon, which you'll see leads us right into the huge, messy question of integrity. And finally, we'll look at the race to regulate this whole thing.
All right, first things first. What on earth is a market for emissions? Well, the concept at its very core is pretty straightforward. Just imagine creating something like a stock exchange, but instead of trading stocks, you're trading carbon. Okay, so a carbon market is basically a big trading system for the right to pollute. Every single credit you hear about, that represents 1 metric ton of CO2 that's been either removed from the atmosphere or prevented from getting there in the first place. So companies that do a great job cutting their own emissions can sell their extra unused credits to other companies that are struggling to meet their goals. It's a mechanism that's designed to make polluting expensive and to make reducing pollution profitable. Now, this is where it starts to get really interesting, because this isn't just one giant single market. Nope. This world is pretty cleanly split right down the middle. On one side, you have what are called compliance markets. Think of these as the mandatory government-run systems. Certain big industries get a legal limit, a cap, on what they can emit. If they go over, they have to buy credits to stay on the right side of the law. Then, on the other side, you have the voluntary markets. This is where companies or organizations, or heck, even you or I, choose to buy carbon credits. Maybe it's to hit a big net zero promise, or just to show they're serious about sustainability.
So let's get specific. Who's actually playing in these two sandboxes? Well, the compliance markets are for the heavy hitters. We're talking power plants, giant factories, airlines, the ones who are legally bound by rules like the big European trading system. But the voluntary market, that's open to pretty much anybody. It could be a giant tech company trying to make good on the carbon neutral pledge, or it could be you clicking a button to offset your flight. The real difference is why they're doing it. One is a legal must-do, the other is a choice.
And this brings us to a really, really crucial point. You'd think, logically, that 1 ton of carbon removed is the same as any other ton of carbon removed. But that is absolutely not how this market sees it. The value is way more complicated than that.
In fact, there's this fantastic analogy that just nails it. To really get carbon markets, you have to think about diamonds, not gold. I mean, an ounce of gold is an ounce of gold, right? It's a standard commodity. But diamonds? No way. Every diamond is different, and its value depends on very specific characteristics. And that's exactly what carbon credits are like. A ton is simply not just a ton.
So if these credits are like diamonds, how do you grade them? Well, you can kind of think of them as having their own 4 C's. First, you've got the category. Is it a project protecting a rainforest, or is it one handing out clean cook stoves? Very different. Then there's the country it's in. The community involvement is also a big one. And then, and this is a huge one, the co-benefits. Does the project also help protect wildlife or improve people's health? All of these things mean that 2 credits, both representing 1 ton of carbon, can have completely different price tag.
You can probably see where this is going. All of this complexity leads us straight to the single biggest challenge facing these markets today: integrity. With so much variation and so much money on the line, how can we be sure that these credits are, real, that they actually represent what they claim to? Just listen to this. This quote comes from a group of investigative journalists. They said the whole process took them over 3 months of digging through hundreds of documents just to try and verify a few projects. It really shines a light on how murky this whole world can be. And it makes you wonder, right? If it's that hard for reporters to get a straight answer, how can anyone else trust the claims being made?
So let's break down the big red flags. First, there's greenwashing, which is pretty much just making misleading claims. Then you have additionality.
This one's a mind bender, but it's critical. Would this climate-friendly thing have happened anyway, even without the money from the carbon credit? If the answer is yes, then the credit is basically worthless. Then you have problems like overestimation of the benefits, double counting, where the same credit gets sold and counted twice, and a really important one, making sure the community on the ground actually sees the benefits. And here's a perfect real-world example of that overestimation problem. So, a project goes out and gives clean cook stoves to a village. They calculate the carbon credits based on the assumption that everyone is using these new stoves all the time. But when investigators go and check, they find out that, whoops, a lot of the families already had a cleaner gas stove that they actually prefer to use. So the new stoves just sit there. All of a sudden, those claimed carbon savings, they're not real. Okay, so because of all these integrity problems, the pressure to get some real rules in place has become massive. The entire future of carbon markets really depends on building a system that's reliable, transparent, and, well, trustworthy.
To try and fix this mess, the world is hammering out a global rulebook under what's called Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. It basically sets up two main ways for countries to trade credits. One is a direct country-to-country system. The other is a new, centralized marketplace that's going to be supervised by the UN. But the number one most important rule for both of them is to finally kill double counting and make absolutely sure that every single credit is only sold and counted one time.
And we're not just seeing this at the global level. It's happening nationally, too. India, which is a massive source of carbon credits, is a perfect case study. The government there has changed its laws and is now rolling out its very own regulated carbon credit trading scheme. The plan is to kick off trading for voluntary offsets in 2025 and then have a full-blown compliance market up and running by 2026.
And look, this isn't just some vague plan. This right here is the official government document from India, the actual legal paperwork that sets up the whole framework. This shows a huge shift, moving from a Wild West, voluntary space to a formal government-backed system. It's a sign of where things are heading everywhere. And that brings us right back to where we started. Carbon markets are, without a doubt, an incredibly powerful idea. They have the potential to move billions of dollars into real climate action. But as we've seen, they are just full of complexities and some very real risks. The race is on to build trust and integrity into these systems before time runs out, which leaves us all with the ultimate question. Can we perfect this powerful, complicated tool in time to actually make a difference?